Let's talk right now, though, to Rupert Lowe. He's Reform UK's parliamentary candidate in Great Yarmouth, a former MEP, of course, and he joins us right now to discuss Nigel Farage running for a seat and taking over as leader of his party. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, I mean, there's no doubt at all, set the cat among the pigeons yesterday. Nigel Farage, with his emergency election announcement, not just back as leader of the party, Reform, taking over from Richard Tice, who's moving to be chairman, but to run as a candidate. He says this is about leading a political revolt. We're asking our listeners and our audience today, is this the start of a political revolution? Is it? And what will it achieve?
Well, I think a political revolution is underway, Julia. And first of all, I think Richard Tice deserves great credit for his long-headedness in being prepared to step aside, along with myself and a group of other people, including Anne Widdecombe and Ben Habib. We've kept Reform going. Nigel basically has single-handedly created a situation now where a revolution can happen in the way in which we're governed. I think unlike Hannibal, and using a historical analogy, Hannibal paused when he could have conquered Rome. He lost his nerve and he retreated. And as a result, the Romans regrouped and ultimately, as we know, they destroyed Carthage. I think Nigel has basically decided that unlike Hannibal, he needs to come back. And if what I'm seeing on the ground in Great Yarmouth is reflective of what's happening in the rest of the country, I think the British people are now, it's quite visible to them that we're not being governed properly. The people in power are a bunch of self-interested, pork-barreling, self-serving people who have a limited amount of ability. They don't plan long-term, and the country is gradually going to the dogs. So I really think there is a huge opportunity now if Reform puts itself forward, which we're doing. It needs brave people who are prepared to stand up, because you do get a lot of resistance from some people. I think we are going to see the beginning of a revolution in British
But what would
politics.
be okay? Here's the thing. Now, you've spoken for a long time there, Rupert. What would be different about Reform UK MPs getting elected, and how, again, look, no one thinks under our first past the post system or where you are in the polls right now that Reform are going to form the next government. Looking at where the polls are now, not even going to be kingmakers in terms of going into a coalition or deciding which of the two major parties win. Labour, on the polls currently, are going to win a landslide of some sort. Okay, worst case scenario for them, a small majority, if there are no polls even suggesting that. So what would change by people electing Nigel Farage or any other, including candidates like yourself, to the Houses of Parliament? What changes then?
Well, first of all, Julie, we were the kingmakers in the last election, and we gave the Tories an 80-seat majority. Nigel stood down in 300 seats. I stood down in Dudley North and gave a seat to a man called Marco Longhi. The Tories have basically not used an 80-seat majority to do what they should have done. I think we can all agree on that. In terms of change, you're quite right about first past the post. As Nigel said yesterday, on balance of probability, Labour will win this election, which will be a disaster for the country. But change happens from small beginnings. And the most important thing is, as Nigel says, we get in a number of people into Parliament. The one thing that the Tories and Labour didn't want, the duopoly of power, which is what's destroyed the country. They don't want people from outside the current political establishment in Parliament, because once you're in Parliament, you have a democratic mandate to actually bring to people's attention what is wrong. And there's a lot wrong.
But is the aim here from Nigel? Because Nigel Farage has said a number of different things. He wants to destroy the Conservative Party. He's made, sometimes perhaps jokey hints about, how he'd be the most popular figure to take over the Tory Party. The last time he went to Tory Party conference, he was greeted like Boris Johnson used to be greeted, for goodness sake. Not even a member of the party. Is the aim to basically usurp and take over the centre-right of the British political establishment, or is it to actually take over the Tory party?
I think it's to change the way we're governed, Julia. That's what I'm doing.
How?
I want to see.
You have to be in power to do that.
I want to see it run better. I want to see less.
You have to be in power to do that.
I want to see a far smaller state. I want to see lots of things
Rupert, you have to be in power to do that.
But Julia, as the Labour Party took power in the early stages of 1900 to 1920, it doesn't happen immediately with a two-party first past.
You're saying this is a building block to the next election and the next election.
You have to build. You have to build, and I think people are going to be astounded by what happens in this general election. I mean, I can tell you, on the ground in Great Yarmouth, people are crying out for some proper leadership. They can actually see what's happening to their lives. They're being overtaxed, overregulated. Their lives are being spoilt by petty-minded people. And it's not just the Tories, Julia. This is Labour are worse. Labour started mass immigration. You know, and my strapline in Great Yarmouth is, if you want more uncontrolled mass immigration, vote Labour. They started it, which they did. Labour brought the Human Rights Act, it brought the Equality Act. And what the Tories singularly failed to do was repeal all that rubbish.
And that's what's been talking about. I know that Nigel Farage has been talking about he wants a zero net migration for the next few years. That would still mean, though, with 600,000 people leaving the country, 600,000 more coming in. So we might have no more increase in our population, but there'll still be 600,000 people coming from abroad. How are we going to choose who those people are? Who would be allowed in and who wouldn't?
I've been on your programme before. The first thing we have to do is we have to repeal the Human Rights Act of 1998.
That's processology.
That's got to go.
Who would we? Yeah, who would we choose? We've only got a minute left. Who would we choose?
Leave the ECHR. And
that's process. That's not what I've asked you.
Julia, you asked me a question. I'm answering it. We then have to target the people we want to come into the country and ensure that the people we don't want to come into the country, there is zero tolerance in terms of either legal or illegal people who are not going to contribute to British economy. So it's actually quite simple if you have people who believe that it needs to be done. The Australians showed us how to do it, and they have an incredibly effective immigration policy. It works extremely well. And we can do that. It's just a question of having the will to do it.
OK, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. That is Rupert Lowe, Reform UK's parliamentary candidate in Great Yarmouth.